Thank you very much. Thank you for joining the 2024 State of the City Address. Before we get started, I want to first acknowledge the elected officials in the room. First of all, we have our Cook County Commissioner, Justina Morita, is here. We have representatives of our federal and state delegation from Congresswoman Schakowsky's office, Andrew Guskowski. From Representative Gable's office, Diane Goldring. And from Senator Fine's office, Pat Whalen. We're joined by many of my my colleagues from City Council, representing the 1st Ward, Claire Kelly. The 3rd Ward, Melissa Wynn. The 4th Ward, Jonathan Nusma. The 7th Ward, Eleanor Revelle. And the 9th Ward, Juan Haracaris. We are joined by our city clerk, Stephanie Mendoza. And I already mentioned former Mayor Steve Haggerty is with us, as is the former representative of the 2nd Ward on City Council, Peter Braithwaite. And the former representative of the 7th Ward, Jane Grover. Who did I miss? Okay. I want to say a big thank you to the people who made this happen, to our city staff, many of whom are represented in this room this afternoon, who put this event together. The logistics of this are not small and they're not simple, and so I want to give a particular shout out to Jesse Mayo from our communications operation. And if I were to name the entirety of the city staff represented here, I would violate my promise to keep this concise, a promise I will violate later anyhow, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. But at a minimum, I want to say a word of appreciation to our city manager, Luke Stowe, for all the hard work you do for the community of Evanston. As in previous years, we are composting at this event with the help of Evanston-based Collective Resource Compost Cooperative. You all clapped, so I'm not probably in need of reading the next thing here, but the point is that when food scraps go to landfills, they create methane, a greenhouse gas which is far more potent than CO2. So we have chosen to help mitigate climate change this afternoon. And finally, I want to say a huge thank you to Space and Union for working so hard with us to make this event a success. We're not the world's easiest client, and we probably don't pay the best either. But it's really a delight to work with you. Two businesses that have become kind of beloved mainstays of the Evanston small business community. And I want to particularly highlight that there's an event that we've really grown to love as Evanstonians, the Out of Space series that occurs every summer. And this summer, because of construction, it will not be going on in Canal Shores, but almost kind of as a replacement, there's going to be a folk music festival on the lakefront in early September, hosted by Space, with a remarkable lineup and just a very, very exciting opportunity for music and culture and food and togetherness and talks, and just a chance for us to really enjoy our most precious asset as a city. And I have to tell you, I've been thinking about the folk festival a lot over the last couple of weeks because I've had on my mind this $1.7 million toilet in San Francisco. You seem puzzled. So here's the story. This is a toilet that's become like one of the most famous toilets, at least in the Bay Area. It's in a park in San Francisco, and it cost $1.7 million, and it became a big big issue of controversy. It's been written up in the New York Times multiple times. It's been all over the California press. It's been on public radio. How could it be that this toilet cost $1.7 million? And because it became like the kind of viral example of government waste of the month, there was a lot of digging that went into it. And here's what the digging uncovered. The digging uncovered was that the thing that was special about this toilet wasn't that it cost $1.7 million. That's just what it cost to do the installation of a toilet in a park in San Francisco. The thing that was unusual about it was that people noticed this one time. But what's happened over the course of years is that in an effort to enact policies that achieve a variety of really sensible and important goals, the process by which you build a toilet in a San Francisco park has become so convoluted that now it costs $1.7 million to do. And I want to stress that the benefits of these policies that make it so expensive are real, right? So like, for example, corruption and cronyism in government contracting is a real problem in the world, and it's important to take on that problem. But if your procurement processes that you put in place to overcome that problem are so elaborate that it's impossible to procure anything without spending $1.7 billion on a toilet, you've found yourself in a situation where you're actually creating more of a problem than you're solving. God knows there's nobody in this room who cares more about environmental protections than I do, but if the environmental review process stops us from building wind turbines and installing solar panels and making our transmission grid able to accept more green energy, in the name of environmental review, we've somehow found ourselves off the rails. Oh, and by the way, protecting the character of our neighborhoods is a really, really important goal for a city. But you know, the most important thing that makes up the character of our neighborhoods is not the buildings, but the people in them. And if the rules that we have in place make it so difficult for us to build more housing supply and make housing affordable, that the people who live in the neighborhoods are driven out by gentrification, what we've actually done is destroyed the character of the neighborhoods in the name of preserving it. And so, I say all of this because we live in a country that was founded by people who were terrified, with good reason, of government overreach. And they built a system that made it really easy for us to stop government from doing things. And then every time we encounter a new problem in society, we pass a law to address that problem by making it yet harder for government to do more things. And we've done that to the point that we're now stuck. And it's so difficult to make progress. In fact, we've gotten ourselves so stuck that the number of people who think the government is able to solve problems at all has become minuscule. And so as I think about the situation that we find ourselves in Evanston, the opportunities that are before us and the challenges that we face, what I see as most necessary is for us to break out of this prison of a system that makes bold action so very difficult. Now, back to the folk festival, it would have been easy just to say no. We could have just said, no, it's too complicated, it's too potentially disruptive, it's something we haven't done before that makes us uncomfortable. This is the kind of thing the government is kind of set up to say no to. But we had a city council that was able to think not about whether to say no, but instead about how to say yes. And we had a city staff that was excited to think not about whether to say no, but about how to say yes. And I think that kind of attitude is absolutely necessary as we go through our work of trying to confront the key problems that exist in society today. So the good news, and I don't want to minimize, to my friends at Space, I don't want to minimize the approval of a single folk festival, but the good news is that that's not the only thing that we said yes to this year. We've done a lot of good this year since I last spoke at this microphone. And so I want to say a few words about some of the things that we've done. And some of them maybe you've not heard of at all. Some of them you have. We banned flavored tobacco in the city of Evanston. Evanston has a history of being at the forefront of public health measures. When Evanston first went smoke-free indoors, that was viewed as some kind of like kooky, unusual thing that only some sort of, left-wing college town like Evanston would consider doing. And it became standard. It's hard for us to even remember the time when the state didn't have policies like that in place, and lives have been saved because of it. People are healthier because of it. People are alive because of it. And so now we're taking the next step, being the first community in the state to ban flavored tobacco, to continue to be at the forefront of public health initiatives that keep people safe and alive with their loved ones. We in Illinois sometimes view good government reforms that have become standard in other states as radical innovations. And so I'm proud that we are the first community in the state to pass a public financing system called small donor matching for our mayoral elections, which means that we are finally, in a real and meaningful and concrete way, taking on the scourge of money in politics here in Evanston. This was, by the way, just to be parochial for a second, a really bad idea for me politically. Like, this is like an anti-incumbent mayor initiative, basically. So get your petitions ready. But it's the right thing to do, and it's an initiative that tackles this fundamental problem that exists in American government today that has been standard practice in New York City for decades and decades. It's become common in many places across the country, but somehow in Illinois, we haven't quite woken up to it yet. Well, in Evanston, we've taken that step, and we're proud to have done it. We, thanks to the leadership of Steve Haggerty and his partnership with the then Northwestern president, Morty Shapiro, had a guaranteed income pilot that began in late 2022 and ended in late 2023, providing a monthly $500 check to 150 Evanston households who were really in need of that support. And there's been an immense amount of research that's gone into that program, and what we've learned so far is that it made a really big difference, potentially a transformational difference in Evanston families' lives. And so just a few weeks ago, we authorized the second tranche of that program, building on the success of the first tranche, but also changing the way it's going to be administered to track even more closely to the research that we have both about Evanston's needs and about how these programs best work. So let me say a word about that. We have something in Evanston called the E-Plan, the Evanston Project for the Local Assessment of Needs. I did write that down. Where we engage in a really deep dive on the public health data in our community. And we learn about health inequities, wealth inequities, income inequities, environmental inequities that exist across our community. And the answers that we get to those questions are pretty stark. Pretty stark. Census Tract 8092, the census tract that most overlaps the 5th Ward as well as part of the 2nd Ward, by all of these measures, has significant disadvantages compared to the rest of the census tracts around it. And in fact, the life expectancy gap between Census Tract 8092 and an adjacent census tract is 13 years. 13 years, think of that. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that and a lot of different things that we're going to have to do to change that. But one thing that we know from the research is that if families that are experiencing economic hardship and have young children are given a modest amount of money, a $500 check every month, not only does that just help, right? The thing they need most is money, and it helps them by giving it to them, but it changes trajectories. It changes trajectories by giving stability that allows the young person to be ready for school. It changes trajectories by giving the family enough breathing room that maybe they have the ability then to seek out stable long-term employment with opportunities for advancement and more economic security. And so the data are crystal clear that this is a concept that works. And because we know where in Evanston the need is, and quite frankly, because that's a circumscribed area that's not so massive, we have the resources to meet that need. And so the next tranche of guaranteed income that Council just unanimously approved will provide a monthly $500 check to each income qualifying family with small children in Census Tract 8092, with the potential to fundamentally change trajectories in the neighborhood and for the families in this community that most need it. We're continuing on a project on South Boulevard There's what was a kind of an underutilized city-owned parking lot called Lot 1 on South Boulevard, close to the Purple Line South Boulevard stop, close to the lake, in a beautiful neighborhood. Probably not the best use of that parcel. And so working with a private partner, that's now being developed into affordable housing. So we're going to turn an underutilized parcel in a phenomenal part of town into a place that will welcome more Evanstonians, address our affordable housing issues, and do it in a transit-oriented, sustainable way, providing opportunities for instance, Carla's families to still be able to take the public transit to work. This is an example of something that is going to make a real difference, chipping away at some of the most challenging issues that we face as a community. And by the way, don't tell anybody, but it's a model for what we can continue to do and do more and more and more of if we truly mean what we say about our commitment to affordable housing and sustainability. We are standing up this program as essentially an outgrowth of our Youth and Young Adult Division and our Parks and Recreation Department, a system of community responders, individuals who will be alternate responders instead of police to 10 different types of 911 calls that our analysis demonstrates can be better addressed by non-police responders. This is so sensible. We are acknowledging that the amount of different things that we ask our cops to do is just impossible. We ask them to do more different things than any person could possibly be asked to do. And so this is a step toward narrowing that scope. So we ask our trained sworn officers to do the things that we need them to do, that only they could do. And I'm afraid there's plenty of things like that as well. Whereas the other kinds of responsibilities, where someone who's not a sworn officer, but perhaps has mental health training, experience in counseling, lived experience, would be the more appropriate person to respond to. And I want to say a little bit about the nature of this project, because I think it speaks to the kind of attitude and the kind of collaboration that's needed for us to make the progress that our community requires. First of all, this is something that is being done outside of the police department, because we are very clear about the fact that this is a response that should happen in lieu of police. This is a set of functions that we're currently asking the police to do that we really shouldn't be asking them to do. Some people are sometimes queasy about that. Shouldn't there be a police officer there also? No, we say this is a different set of problems that require a different set of solutions. And also, it's being done in close collaboration with and support from the police department. And so we will have a team of community responders who are not sworn officers who can respond to these calls that really, in the opinion of our dispatchers, will not require sworn officers, but they'll be able to communicate and partner effectively with police so that if the wrong team is sent, they can call in support, so that they can problem solve together, so that they can agglomerate their shared knowledge to make sure that we're fully meeting the community's needs. And thanks. And I do want to say something else about this, and forgive me if this is a little bit sharp, but after George Floyd was murdered, every community in the country started talking about how to think differently about policing. And thank God that they did. Thank God that they did. But the truth of the matter is that some of those communities kind of lurched into a reaction that in some cases they've since walked back or they've found unable to implement and sort of have abandoned altogether. And other communities, if I'm just being totally honest here, they talked about it for a while until the political pressure abated, and then they kind of moved on without changing much. Evanston didn't do either one of those things. We established, under the previous mayor, the council established an alternate 911 response subcommittee. As essentially our first act as a new council, we established Reimagining Public Safety Committee, and those committees continued to do their work and really dig in on the data and the community engagement and make sure that we understood the right way to take some of these steps. And we're going to continue moving forward because we believe in it because we know it's the right thing to do, and because we have the right team. We have a police department that is committed to a humanistic approach and believes in reform. And we have a city organization that knows how to work productively and collaboratively with them to provide for public safety in a humanistic way. And I'm really proud of that. I think it's the right way for us to collaboratively solve these problems. The last item I wanted to mention is something that we did this year. I think there's a very good chance several of you have heard of it. The city of Evanston was incorporated 160 plus years ago now. Northwestern University has been around for longer than that. And as far as I can tell, during the entirety of that time, there's been tension about the university's consumption of public services, the university's non-payment of taxes, the university's role as a neighbor. That's been an intense part of this city's reality, literally from day one. We were able this year to negotiate an agreement to fundamentally transform the financial relationship between the city and the university, to bring in ongoing funding for at least 15 years, unlike anything that the university has done for the city before. That is a transformation. And by the way, I see that as the floor for the future of this relationship. So that alone, I think, is an extraordinary achievement and one that I'm really, really proud of. And frankly, if you'd asked me when I was running for mayor, thank you. If you'd asked me when I was running for mayor if I would have thought that during a 4-year term I could negotiate an agreement like that in partnership with the city council and our team, I wouldn't have imagined that to be possible. And to be honest, I think if 6 months before the agreement was signed, you'd asked Northwestern if they would ever agree to it, they also wouldn't have thought it was possible. But we got there, and we got there not by pointing fingers or being, attack dogs, but also by understanding our leverage, understanding that we shouldn't say yes lightly, understanding that in this 150-year-long relationship, with so many twists and turns to the way in which the two institutions interacted, there weren't that many moments when the city had an opportunity in its hands to change that trajectory. And I'm proud that we did that. I'm proud that we did that. And again, I think the right answer here wasn't no and it wasn't yes. And had we just come to the table with no, we wouldn't have wound up with anything. Had we come to the table with yes, we wouldn't have wound up with what we wound up with. Instead, I think we did the right thing by coming to the table saying we're open, we're willing to listen, but we're only going to move forward when what we hear from the university is right for the city. And I'm glad that we got that, and I think that's a model going forward for how we can interact not only with the university, but with all of our other partners. Making sure that the steps that we take are beneficial not just for one constituency or one entity, but for the whole community. And so I think, thank you. And so I am a very, very passionate believer in the power of this government, the city of Evanston's government, to make change, to do good, to solve the problems that we're facing, to address the challenges that exist in this town. We have a lot left to do, and before I get to that, I also want to acknowledge that we've also just had a lot of difficulty in the last year. It's been a hard year in Evanston, in part because it's been a hard year in the world. This is a little bit more than 7 months after the attacks of October 7th. It's a little more than 7 months since this horrible war began. Evanstonians were taken hostage, returned, thank God, but still taken hostage. Many Evanstonians lost people they loved. I loathe the phrase sides in this context, but I will say many Evanstonians on both sides lost people they love. People are experiencing deep anguish, and people continue to experience deep anguish. And I would say, as somebody who was fortunate enough not to lose someone I loved, that anybody with a heart reading the newspaper or following what's going on right now is in anguish, must be in anguish. We live in a community, and by the way, thank God for this too. We live in a community that when it's feeling anguish and wanting change doesn't just sit around. It stands up and demands change. It protests, it marches, it speaks out. And people have been standing up and speaking out and protesting and marching in Evanston, and I say thank God for that. I wouldn't want to live in a place where people view tragedy elsewhere in the world as just somebody else's problem. The intensity of that protest has been so great that there's been a move to push City Council to involve itself. And so I wanted to just take a minute to be extremely clear about my own position on that, because I think it's not always been obvious necessarily to everybody. So what I have said about this is that I don't think the City Council should weigh in on issues that are outside of our purview unless those issues unify the community. And I think when I say that, some people wonder, why do you make it so complicated, Daniel? Why don't you just say that the city of Evanston shouldn't weigh in on issues outside our purview at all? And the answer is that I think when those issues unify the community, it's actually productive. When you think about the community coming together and reaching a consensus on a critical issue, even a critical issue that the city of Evanston has no control over, that process of working through a tough issue and coming to agreement and then being able to state our policy preferences and values and priorities to the world makes us stronger. And that strength then enables us to be better positioned to take on the next challenge and the one after that and the one after that. On the flip side, if we react to an issue where we have no control, where there's not a thing that we could do to make it better, by inflaming division, by pitting Evanstonians against each other, by, let's say, trying to jam a resolution through on a narrow 5-4 vote with a lot of people left hurt. We still haven't changed anything that would happen in the Middle East, of course. But what we would have done is picked at wounds in our community, pitted people against one another, made us less clear about what our values are, and weakened us in our efforts to then be able to address the next problem that comes up and the next one and the one after that, which in fact are directly relevant to the lives of Evanstonians. And so that's my opinion. I think as long as the issue is posed in a way that it pits Evanstonians against each other and creates division and hurts feelings, I think it is a step backwards and counterproductive for the city of Evanston to have a council vote and take a formal position. I would say to people who have strong feelings, I'm glad you do, and I want you to speak up, and I want you to protest, and I want you to march, and I want you to fight. But I don't think we'll be making the world better if the city of Evanston joins in a formal way by dividing people and making it harder for us to solve the next problem that comes around. Now, the last couple of weeks have, of course, been particularly challenging around this issue. And I just want to say something very, very clear here. I've been so proud of the city of Evanston in the last 2 weeks. As I've worked with the city manager and his team, with the police chief and her team, we have been perfectly aligned on this fundamental value, this fundamental principle, which is that we, the city of Evanston, should not be involved in interfering with protest or arresting protesters unless there is an absolutely essential reason to do so. And I understand, occasionally it's essential. If there's violence, God knows, if there's a traffic hazard being created, then the city's hand begins to change. But we believe to our core that it is not our job to police protesting because of what the protests stand for how they call for it, for what they say, for who they make uncomfortable, even for who they offend, even if they offend me. That is not our job. And across the country, as, in my opinion, some municipalities have jumped the gun and overreacted and cracked down in ways that were counterproductive and, in my opinion, morally wrong, we did not fall in that trap, because our values are clear and we know our responsibility, and that responsibility is not to crack down on nonviolent protest. So I know there's people who disagree with that. I understand that. And my message for them, those who would like to see the city change that position and begin participating in the arrest of nonviolent protesters, except for when there's a key safety reason to do so. My message for those people are clear. Next year, there's a mayoral election. Good luck. Speaking of next year, before we wrap, I want to lay out my thoughts about 4 issues that I think we really need to make a focus during the course of the next year. 4 issues that are going to be on my mind, that I think are going to be on the city's organization's mind, and that I think are aligned with what our community is really seeking to get done. First of all, I believe that we have a moral responsibility to do whatever we can to pull our weight in addressing the crisis related to new arrivals to the Chicago area. We did not cause this as Evanston. The city of Chicago didn't cause this. The state of Illinois didn't cause this. Quite frankly, this has been caused by a partisan political effort on the part of Republicans to use human beings as political pawns to make a political point for an election happening in November. And it is grotesque and it is personally offensive, but it is also easy for an individual municipality to say, that's really bad and it's a good thing it's somebody else's problem. But that is not the Evanston way. That is not the Evanston way. We have been trying diligently for years now to find the right way for Evanston to participate in the housing of migrants, to carry our share. Because this is a regional crisis, and if not everyone does their share, it will become truly, truly unmanageable. And so we haven't found the perfect solution yet. We've devoted a lot of time to it. You may have heard from Allison Leipziger, who's been donning PPE to go into unsafe buildings to see what it would take to make them safe. The answer is too much money and too much time. But we're going to keep at it because we're Evanston. We don't see a crisis like that and conclude that it's somebody else's problem. We're going to figure out what we can do to help. And if we can't help, it's not going to be for lack of trying. Next, there is so much more progress that we need to make on climate. We are justifiably proud of our climate action and resilience plan. It is an important landmark setting our priorities as a community. But those goals in that plan aren't going to achieve themselves. And so we have to pass a healthy building ordinance, which basically says you can't clap yet, I haven't said what it is. But when I do, here's the deal. The Climate Action and Resilience Plan puts in place targets for emission reduction. So, total neutrality by 2050, for instance. Almost half of the emissions in Evanston come from the 500 largest buildings. We're not going to just achieve those targets by waking up one day in a few decades and noticing that they've happened. That's just not how this is going to go. We are going to have to work with those buildings. We're going to have to hold them accountable to goals along the way, for instance, every 5 years. We're going to have to provide technical assistance and support. We may have to find external money, for example, help through the federal government. But we're going to have to put in place a plan and a system with each of those 500 buildings to make sure that they are on the trajectory that they need to be on to reduce emissions. This is something that has been done in St. Louis, in Denver, Seattle, Boston, a number of places. But once again, we have the opportunity to be a leader, to be the first community in Illinois, the second in the Midwest to do this. And the thing about this issue is that when Evanston acts on climate, of course it matters because every bit of CO2 not emitted is a bit of CO2 that's not emitted. But it also matters because we provide a model for our neighbors. We show that it's possible. We demonstrate that it's not only something that happens in places with California's climate or Massachusetts' politics. It's things that can happen right here. And we've got a neighbor to the south that's pretty large. When we spur them into action, it's a huge multiplier on the effect of what we do. So a healthy buildings ordinance will be coming to this community. It's going to be hard. It's going to be complicated. Kara Pratt, our sustainability and resilience manager, has pointed out with admirable and annoying honesty that we are past the point on climate where things are easy and there's no trade-offs. We're going to have to make hard choices, but we're going to have to make hard choices. And this is the next one that's coming, in my opinion, to the city of Evanston. Matt, you can clap now. The city council took a step that some of my friends who've worked for the city of Evanston for decades thought would never happen, which is we signed a lease to temporarily move the seat of city government out of the Civic Center and to 909 Davis in downtown Evanston. That's a really, really critical step, but it's just a kind of a introduction to the real and difficult conversation that we've got to have. Our Civic Center is not in a condition right now to be a city hall. Our police station is rapidly reaching a point of unacceptability. We learned recently about the cost of repairs needed in the Noyes Cultural Arts Center. We have old buildings that have significant needs. And by the way, we also have, as I mentioned before, underutilized assets like surface parking lots. We've got to solve these problems. And these problems that I just mentioned, Civic Center, Noyes, police station, what to do about the various other city properties, each one is really difficult. Each one is daunting. But what I hope that we do, notwithstanding that difficulty, is that we think about them together as a unit, because I think the best and most creative solutions may not be one for one, but may be about how to combine certain services, how to divide other services, how to partner with external entities. We've got to be willing to be creative and smart here, and we've got to actually act so that we don't wind up incurring extra costs because of the cost of inaction. And we're going to be doing a lot of community engagement. In fact, council just approved an additional survey we'll be doing with the community on this issue. And so I'm not prepared to take a position yet because I need to learn more about what the community wants, but I do want to make a directional suggestion. All of this stuff that we're talking about that we need to do, whatever choice we make, whatever your preferred option is, guess what they all are? Expensive. And so with that in mind, I think it's important that we have frugality in mind for a very simple reason. If you were to line up the priorities of climate action, affordable housing, public safety, economic development, and then ask where in that hierarchy would you slot having an extremely awesome city hall? I don't think it's at the top of the list. And as we go down this path and think about these different options, we need to be cognizant of the fact that any choice we make is taking resources away from the other pivotal functions that our community demands of us that really are what makes this community what it is. And so I just want to kind of put a little pitch out there as we continue as a community to think through these questions to make sure that we're cost conscious, because every dollar we spend on our own internal physical plant is a dollar we're not putting out the door to spend on some of these other priorities. Last and extremely not least, I want to talk about another ongoing initiative that is, I think, just a gold mine of opportunity. A gold mine of opportunity for this community. We have launched something called Envision Evanston 2045. This is an effort to rewrite our comprehensive plan and our zoning code. If you read our comprehensive plan, which, why? But if you read our comprehensive plan, it sort of like reads like a document from a different dimension. We haven't gone through this exercise in a really long time, and it shows in these documents. And so we are asking for a ton of input and a ton of engagement, and we are getting it and thinking about how to work on these issues. But the reason that I think it has so much opportunity is I look at our zoning code as a system of rules that makes it hard to do what we say we want to do. Take affordable housing. So Karen and Sparrow and I Karen, an unnamed minor, and I live in a modest townhome on Central Street. And it's not much, but we love living there, and we can afford it, and we can afford to live at Evanston because it exists. But if you wanted, literally around the corner, to build a version of our house that someone like me could afford to live in, that's illegal. That's illegal because this is an adjoining townhome. It's not a freestanding single-family home. And around the corner from my house, in fact, in 95% of my neighborhood, even though I live across the street from a CTA bus stop, it's illegal to build anything but a single-family home on a large lot, no less. And it's hard to build high, and it's hard to build without adding parking. There are so many ways in which we make it difficult to add to the supply of housing, and then we act puzzled about the fact that with demand high and supply not going up, the cost keeps going through the roof. The most important thing we can do for affordable housing is to add to supply, and our zoning code is the most significant constraint on doing that, but it doesn't stop there, so don't clap yet. We talk about how passionate we are about climate. Guess what happens when you let more people live in multifamily housing near transit? They can live without cars, or they can use their car much less. They use so much less energy to heat and cool their home. By the way, it's not just individual people counted separately. The more density you have in these urban cores, the more vibrant the life becomes, and the more people want to be there. Oh, did we talk about vibrancy? Sorry, I got ahead of myself. One of the complaints I get most often, and I totally understand why, is the number of vacant storefronts in downtown. Well, this is a long conversation, but the biggest reason for it is that until March of 2020, there was an incredible number of people who had to be downtown between Monday and Friday, 9 to 5. They're still not mostly back. And when they're not back, they're not eating lunch out. They're not shopping on the way to the L or the Metro. They're not stopping for coffee. And that's very, very problematic for our small businesses. Well, either we can just wish them back into the office. I would recommend that against that strategy. Or we can replace them. And the simplest way to replace them is with residential density. And so if we take the opportunities presented to us in the Envision Evanston 2045 project seriously, we can really effectuate a game changer on affordability, on economic activity, on sustainability, on the vibrancy and thriving nature of our community, and saving the best for last. Let us not for a second forget that many of these zoning restrictions came into effect as an effort to make segregation stick. And for all of our talk about equity in this community, how much of that have we rolled back? So what an opportunity to do good. But you guys, it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be painless, and it's not going to be uncontroversial. Change is hard. It makes us nervous. And so I am asking myself, and I'm asking all of us to be willing to be bold as we go through this process. Because by the way, if we kind of come out of this thing nibbling around the edges a little bit, it'll have all been a big waste of time and money. It'll be a demoralizing flop. And so I'm asking us to be willing to be bold as we envision, I would say no pun intended, but of course we called it Envision Evanston for a reason, as we envision, good job staff, you named it well, as we envision what our community could be if we designed the built environment in a way that were truly, truly consistent with the values that we say guide us. And so that's where I want to close. We've done a lot. We've done a lot in hard times. We've done a lot in a time of strife and difficulty, but we've done a lot, and it's made a difference, and it's done a lot of good. But we have so much more that we have to do. The challenges ahead of us are so significant. And we're not going to meet them by trying to make Evanston great again. We are going to meet them by together envisioning an Evanston we haven't seen before. We're going to meet them by being audacious and picturing a more beautiful, more equitable, more just, more sustainable, more prosperous, and more vibrant Evanston than we have seen before. That has got to be our North Star. That is what I am shooting for, and I hope you will join me. Thank you very much.